The phone rang while I was stirring my morning tea. My daughter's name flashed on the screen, Jessica. She rarely called. Usually, it was a short, practical text. My first thought was always the same: something's wrong. Hi, Mom. Her voice was bright, melodic, almost ringing. Guess what? You're turning 70, that's huge. We want to celebrate you big time. I paused, spoon halfway to my mouth. Celebrate me? A real party? My heart fluttered like a bird in a cage. Really? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes. We've been planning, and we want you here in California. Just family, maybe a few close friends, nothing extravagant. I sat back, feeling a strange warmth settle in my chest. I hadn't felt a tension like this in years. Not since Robert had died, not since I'd learned to make my own company sufficient. Of course, I said. I'd love to come. After we hung up, I stared at my half-finished tea. The steam curled in little spirals, rising into the sunlight streaming through my kitchen window. My kitchen had been quiet for 6 years. Quiet had been a companion, sometimes comforting, sometimes sharp. But now, the thought of a party, my party, made the air shimmer. I searched for flights online. A round trip cost $340, expensive but worth it. I booked it before I could hesitate. The next day, I went shopping. I tried on 4 dresses before choosing a navy one with pearl buttons, modest and elegant. New shoes, a small clutch. Even the perfume, a bottle of Chanel, carefully wrapped and placed in my bag. I was preparing not just for a trip, but for an idea I hadn't realized I'd missed: being celebrated. Martha, my hairdresser for 15 years, noticed my excitement. You look happy, she said. And she was right. For the first time in years, I genuinely anticipated something joyful. 3 days before the flight, I called Jessica. No answer. I texted. Read receipt, still nothing. I told myself she was busy. She always was. 2 kids, a husband, part-time work life happened. The morning of the flight, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, the shadows long and familiar. I made coffee, checked my suitcase again, smoothing folds, adjusting straps, making sure everything felt perfect. I packed small gifts for the grandchildren. A book for Ava, age 8, another for Mason, age 6. I hadn't held them since they were toddlers. Mostly video calls, brief glimpses through screens. At the airport, I moved carefully through security, aware of the younger travelers rushing past, impatient and distracted. I watched them, envying their confidence. I sat by the window, gazing at planes lifting and descending, imagining my own flight carrying me toward a celebration I almost dared to believe in. The landing in California was smooth. The sun was softer here, filtered through a coastal haze, almost kind. I followed the signs to arrivals and stood by the familiar spot where Jessica had picked me up 3 years ago. People hugged, laughed, waved to one another. My phone remained silent, then I saw it. Instagram, wine glasses raised, vineyard backdrop, girls' trip goals, Napa. No party, no me. Panic crawled up my spine, cold and insistent. I called her. 6 rings, voicemail again, same result. My hands trembled slightly. Finally, I tried again. Mom. Hey, her voice came vibrant, laughing, background noise of chatter and music. What's up? I stood in the sunshine, suitcase by my feet, clutch in hand, and asked carefully, Jessica, the party? There was a pause and then a flustered tone. Oh, right. I thought you were coming next weekend. Napa, I forgot the dates. I'm so sorry. I clenched my hands. 3 weeks of anticipation, all packed away in a suitcase of hope, dissolved in seconds. You promised me a party. We talked about this months ago. Today is my birthday. Today, Jessica. Another pause. I didn't realize. Brad's home with the kids. I can call him. He'll pick you up. Really, Mom? It's just a misunderstanding. You can stay at the house. I looked down at my suitcase, at the carefully folded dress, at the Chanel perfume I'd saved for months. Hope felt fragile in my grip. No, I said softly. Don't fix it. I'm not coming. Jessica's voice rose, sharp. Mom, it was an honest mistake. You're being dramatic. I laughed quietly, bitterly. I'm dramatic, perhaps, but I'm done being invisible. Enjoy your wine, Jessica. I hung up before she could respond. For a moment, I just stood there. Then I turned off my phone. Not airplane mode off. I picked up my suitcase and walked back into the terminal. A coffee shop near baggage claim offered the first distraction. I bought tea and a scone I didn't want. Ate anyway just to have something to do with my hands. The scone tasted like cardboard. The tea burned my tongue, but it was mine. I'd chosen to be here. By evening, I booked a hotel across from the airport. 2 nights, clean, quiet, with a small view of the parking lot. I cried quietly for the first time in years, small, controlled tears. Afterwards, I washed my face, changed into comfortable clothes, and ordered room service. Soup, bread roll, simple, ordinary, satisfying. I watched the documentary about Yellowstone wolves, another about deep sea creatures. Eventually, sleep took me, the TV still on, narrator's voice calm and steady. In the morning, I woke and faced the day alone. Breakfast at the hotel, a walk along nearby streets, watching life unfold around me. Mothers pushing toddlers, couples laughing, families rushing. And I felt, finally, the odd relief of being unnoticed, unbothered, free. By mid morning, I had begun to understand something I'd forgotten. Hope, carefully packed in a suitcase, could survive even disappointment. Sometimes it simply changed shape. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the navy dress still folded neatly on the chair beside me, the Chanel perfume sitting untouched on the nightstand. The room was quiet, the hum of the air conditioner filling the spaces that conversation and laughter usually occupied. I thought about my daughter, her voice loud and carefree, and a strange clarity began to settle in. This wasn't about a party, it was about me. About how I'd been showing up for years and no one had truly noticed. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. The missed calls, the voicemails, I didn't delete them immediately. I wanted to feel them, catalog them, as if acknowledging each one could somehow untangle the knots of frustration, hurt, and disappointment inside me. Eventually, I deleted most, but one from Brad stayed. He had left a message about how the kids missed me, how Jessica felt terrible, how families work through things. I didn't listen, not now. Not yet. Instead, I took a notebook from my suitcase and began making a list. Not a list of feelings, anger, betrayal, disappointment, but a ledger of facts. Every unpaid favor, every overlooked gesture, every dollar given that had been taken for granted. $800 a month sent automatically for 3 years. $28,800. Co-signed a car loan in 2019. $15,000. Down payment they never repaid. $30,000. Emergency room visit when Mason broke his arm. $2,400. Private school tuition assistance for 2 years, $5,000 per year. Plane tickets for visits I had made repeatedly. They had never once come to Phoenix. By the time I paused, I had written $94,200. $90 $4,200. Not with anger, but with clarity. A ledger of recognition. Not for punishment, not for revenge, just recognition that this had been my life, my energy, my money, my effort. And yet, for what? The thought rose unbidden and stubborn. Why had I allowed this to continue for so long? I called my lawyer, Catherine Alvarez, the woman who had helped with Robert's estate 6 years ago. Her familiar voice on the other end was a small comfort. Dorothy, is everything all right? She asked. I need to update my will, I said. My voice was steady. I wasn't asking, I was deciding. Of course, when would you like to come in? I'm in California right now. Can we start over the phone? I told her everything. Not the day at the airport, not the Instagram post, but the larger story. The pattern, the neglect, the invisible years, the accumulation of expectation and disappointment. Catherine listened, quietly, patiently, letting me speak until the words had run out like water from a faucet. Dorothy, she said softly, are you sure? These kinds of changes, they're permanent. Emotionally, they're not easy to undo. I didn't hesitate. I've never been more sure. We spent the next hour talking through every account, every asset, every insurance policy. When we finished, everything I owned, my house, my savings, retirement accounts, even Robert's life insurance, was to be reassigned. Not to Jessica, not to Brad, not even to my grandchildren. To someone who had seen me, truly seen me. Maybe a charity. Maybe Emily, my nephew's daughter, who sent handwritten birthday cards without fail. Catherine's voice carried warmth through the phone. Dorothy, you're making the right choice. Sometimes, self-preservation is the most important kindness we can offer ourselves. That night, I didn't answer the phone when Jessica called. I let it go to voicemail. I wanted to hear her explanations, her apologies, but I didn't want them to influence me. They wouldn't, not anymore. I spent the evening walking along a quiet side street near the hotel, watching the city hum without me. Cars passed, people argued softly in open windows, and the air smelled faintly of exhaust and blooming flowers. For the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of autonomy. The city moved, and I was simply present, unneeded, and yet complete in my own right. Breakfast the next morning was solitary, but not lonely. Eggs, bacon, toast, coffee, simple, unremarkable, entirely mine. I watched a mother wrangle her toddler, a couple argue over directions, a group of friends laughing too loudly at a shared joke. I realized I hadn't felt the freedom of being unseen in years. Here, no one expected me to perform. No one judged. No one asked anything of me beyond myself. I pulled out my notebook again and began writing, not a ledger this time, but observations. The way light fell across the table, how the sunlight caught the dust motes in the air, the texture of the toast, the way the coffee left a ring on the saucer. These small, mundane things felt significant now. I had nothing to prove, nothing to chase. By mid morning, the hotel phone rang, a voicemail from Brad. He sounded concerned, frantic even. He asked if I was okay, if I was coming to the house, if I would reconsider. I deleted it. Each deletion felt lighter than the last, as if erasing the weight of years of obligation from my shoulders. By the time the sun began its slow descent, I had taken a long walk, returned to my room, written pages in my notebook, and felt something unfamiliar: peace. It wasn't relief in the sense of happiness or joy, it was relief in the absence of expectation. I could breathe without accounting to anyone. I could exist without apology. That evening, I sat on the edge of the bed, notebook open, the city lights twinkling faintly through the blinds. I thought of the future, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a space I could claim entirely for myself. I realized, with a quiet certainty, that I could choose who mattered to me. And for the first time in decades, I didn't need anyone's permission to choose. The morning sunlight spilled across the hotel room like a gentle promise. I brewed tea, watching the steam curl in lazy spirals. California felt different now, less like an opportunity to be included, more like a place where I could stand on my own 2 feet. I dressed carefully in a light blouse and soft slacks, not for anyone but myself. Today, I decided, I would explore without expectation, without the weight of disappointment clinging to my shoulders. I wandered past the bustling streets, past car rental agencies, strip malls, and generic hotels. Eventually, I found a quiet patch of grass with a few benches and a small playground. A young mother pushed her toddler on the swing, the child's laughter rising pure and uncomplicated. I sat down on a nearby bench, letting the sound wash over me. For an hour, maybe more, I watched the simple joys of others, savoring the freedom of observing without obligation. When I returned to the hotel, my phone buzzed. Jessica. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity, or perhaps habit, made me listen. Her voice was tight, defensive, almost fragile. Mom, I don't know what to say. I made a mistake. I'm sorry, but you're punishing everyone for it. Brad says you won't talk to him. The kids keep asking where you are. This isn't fair. I let it hang. I saved the voicemail, not out of sentiment, but because I wanted to remember the way she made herself the victim. I didn't respond. I wouldn't. Instead, I called my bank. The representative, Miguel, guided me gently through the process of removing Jessica from my accounts. He asked quietly why, and I told him simply, because I'm done being invisible, taken for granted, and unrecognized. Because I need to protect myself. He paused, then said softly, my mom had to do something similar with my brother. It's hard, but sometimes it's right. And it was. Hard, yes. Painful, yes. But right, I felt a strange lightness settle over me as the final confirmations were made. My money, my security, my independence, they were mine. Not because I wanted to punish, but because I needed to claim what had always belonged to me. That evening, I left the hotel and walked to a small pier nearby. Families laughed, street performers played music that wove through the air, and the ocean stretched endlessly before me, gray blue and infinite. I took a deep breath, savoring the briny air, the rhythm of the waves. The freedom I felt wasn't loud or triumphant. It was quiet, steady, a low hum that resonated in my chest. I took a selfie, gray hair gently framing my face, the navy dress hinting at elegance, the pier and the ocean behind me. For the first time in months, maybe years, I posted a photo of myself on social media. Not for validation, not for attention, but as a marker of self respect. 70. Learning what I'm worth. The response was instant. Likes, comments, words of warmth from friends and distant relatives. One in particular stood out: Emily, my nephew's daughter. Her message was bright, kind, and unassuming. Happy birthday, Aunt Dot. You deserve all the good things, I replied immediately. Thank you, sweetheart. Lunch this week? Yes. My treat, she wrote back. For the first time, someone had reached out without obligation, without expectation, simply because they wanted to connect. And I realized something profound. Blood isn't the only measure of family. Choice is equally powerful. I spent the rest of the day exploring, wandering through small shops, stopping at a cafe to watch people pass. Every face I saw, every small moment of interaction, reminded me that I didn't need permission to exist fully. I could be seen, appreciated, and valued, simply because I existed. By nightfall, I returned to my hotel room and made a simple dinner from room service, a bowl of soup and a roll. The act felt symbolic, nourishing myself without apology, taking care of my own needs first. I ate slowly, savoring the warmth, the quiet, the fact that I had chosen this moment entirely for me. Before sleep, I wrote again in my notebook. Not lists of debts or slights, but observations of beauty, gratitude, and the little victories of claiming my own life. I wrote about the freedom of saying no, of letting go of expectation, and of recognizing that some people simply wouldn't show up. And that was okay. I realized that self respect wasn't about anger, wasn't about revenge. It was about understanding what I deserved and refusing to settle for anything less. That night, I fell asleep with the city humming softly outside my window. The weight of years lifted just enough to feel a glimmer of true peace. The morning after my day on the pier, I woke with a quiet resolve. I no longer wanted to wait for someone to make me feel valued. I was going to do it myself. I dressed carefully, navy cardigan over a soft blouse, comfortable shoes, and a scarf that reminded me of spring mornings in Phoenix. Today, I would explore the city on my own terms, letting curiosity guide me rather than obligations. Emily called mid-morning. Aunt Dot, you free for lunch? I know a little cafe with the best sandwiches. Her voice had a spark I hadn't heard in a long time, light, genuine, inviting. I smiled. I'll be there in 20 minutes. We met at a sunlit corner cafe. Emily arrived with a cheerful wave, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her sketchpad tucked inside. We hugged briefly, a careful balance of affection and respect, neither forced nor hesitant. She ordered coffee, I chose tea. We settled at a small table by the window, watching the world pass. We talked about everything: her work as a graphic designer, the challenges of adult life, small victories, frustrations, and dreams. I shared stories about my own past, about Robert, about Phoenix, about choices I had made and lessons I had learned. Emily listened, genuinely interested, not waiting for her turn to speak. And I realized how rare it was to be truly seen, to be heard without judgment or expectation. After lunch, we walked along a quiet street lined with small shops and bakeries. Emily pointed out a bookstore tucked between a florist and a coffee shop. You have to see this, she said. Inside, the smell of old paper and polished wood was comforting. I ran my fingers along the spines of books, feeling connected to the lives and ideas of others, living or long past. Emily watched me, smiling, and I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. We bought a few books for ourselves and a small gift for the hospice volunteer who had helped Emily with her grandmother's care. On the way back, Emily suggested we start a weekly tradition. Tuesdays, just us. Lunch, coffee, whatever. No stress, no guilt, just time together. I agreed, feeling a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. Choosing this connection, nurturing it, was a radical act after decades of feeling invisible in my own family. Back at the hotel, I spent the afternoon journaling, making a list of what truly mattered to me. Gratitude for Emily's presence, clarity about the limits I needed to set with Jessica, and the realization that my time and energy were precious. I added small joys too: the softness of my favorite scarf, the aroma of fresh tea, the subtle color changes in the ocean at sunset. That evening, I walked along the shoreline, letting the waves lap at my shoes. The horizon stretched endlessly, gray blue and infinite. No one was there to dictate my mood, no one to demand my presence or my attention. For the first time, I felt unburdened by obligation, free to simply exist. Later, I received a call from a hospice nurse I hadn't expected. Her voice was gentle but urgent. Is this Dorothy Brennan? Yes, I said cautiously. My name is Gwen Martinez. I'm calling on behalf of a former friend of yours, Patricia Hartwell. She's in hospice care in Flagstaff and asked to see you. She doesn't have family nearby, only wanted a friendly face. Patty. I hadn't thought of her in decades, not since high school. Memories of late night talks, shared secrets, and laughter long ago came flooding back. My chest tightened. I didn't hesitate. I'll be there tomorrow. Driving north into the pine forests of Flagstaff the next morning, I felt anticipation mix with sorrow. Patty's room at the hospice center was small, bathed in soft light. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, fragile yet radiant with recognition. Time had changed our bodies, but the bond remained. We spoke for hours. High school memories, shared laughter, stories of our separate lives. Patty revealed her greatest regret, never having expressed her gratitude. You always saw me, she whispered, voice weak but clear. Even when no one else did, you made me feel real. I never thanked you. I took her hand, tears gathering in my eyes. Patty, it's not too late. What matters is now. You've mattered all along. She smiled, a fragile, joyful curve of lips, and told me about her plan. A scholarship fund for kids who felt invisible, named after both of us, the Dorothy and Patricia Fund. I nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by the beauty of her vision. It was a gift not just to others, but to the essence of recognition, of being truly seen. When I left Flagstaff 3 days later, Patty had passed peacefully. Her death was sorrowful, yes, but also profoundly full of meaning. She had given me a lesson in seeing, in choosing presence, in valuing the connections that nurtured the soul. Back home in Phoenix, I thought about Jessica, about her absence, about the hollow attempts to include me in obligations that never honored my presence. I realized I was finally at peace with it. Some connections are chosen, some are automatic, but only the chosen ones hold true value. Back in Phoenix, life felt quieter but not lonely. My home, small and familiar, welcomed me with the soft familiarity of years lived well, the echo of memories that were mine alone. I unpacked the navy dress, carefully folded, and placed it in the closet, a reminder of the day I chose myself. I brewed tea, settled on the patio, and watched the Palo Verde tree drop tiny yellow petals onto the stones below. The morning dove cooed from somewhere above. The world was ordinary, yet it felt intimate, alive, and entirely mine. Emily called that afternoon. Aunt Dot, dinner tomorrow, my treat, I smiled. Yes, I'd like that. Over the next few weeks, Tuesdays became our ritual. Sometimes she came to my house, sometimes we went out. Coffee shops, small restaurants, quiet walks through neighborhoods lined with trees. We shared stories, laughter, and the silences that weren't awkward, but filled with understanding. Her presence reminded me that meaningful connections weren't measured by blood, but by choice. One evening, while sipping tea at home, I thought about my house, this modest sanctuary I'd maintained alone for 6 years. The thought of leaving it to Jessica no longer felt right. The pattern was clear: years of neglect, of taking without seeing, of ignoring the person who had nurtured and shaped their lives. I wanted someone who understood the weight of family, the value of presence to inherit it. Emily's laughter rang in my ears, warm and spontaneous, the kind of light I hadn't realized I'd been missing. She had shown up, unprompted, consistently, and without expectation. She was the one. I made the call to Catherine Alvarez, my lawyer. I want to update my will, I said, voice steady. Catherine had managed Robert's estate years ago and understood the gravity of my decisions. Of course, Dorothy, are you sure you want to proceed? Yes, I've never been more sure. We spent the next hour on the phone, outlining the changes. The house, my savings, my retirement accounts, my insurance policy, they would go to someone who had earned it, who had shown me that family was more than obligation. A scholarship fund, perhaps. Emily, definitely. Someone who remembered birthdays, who offered kindness without strings attached. Catherine sent the draft over for review. You're doing the right thing, she said quietly. It's rare to have clarity like this. That night, Jessica called. I let the phone ring once before answering. Mom, Brad just got a notification. Did you remove me from your accounts? Yes. Why would you do that? We needed that money. Her voice was sharp, urgent, like a sudden storm. I'm not a bank, I'm your mother. I deserve to be seen and valued. That's different from being owed. That's different from being taken for granted. She protested, but I had no patience for debate. The conversation ended abruptly, with a mix of frustration and disbelief on her side, and a quiet, strange relief on mine. I had finally established a boundary that wasn't negotiable. The next morning, I rose early, brewed tea, and looked out at the desert horizon. I wasn't waiting for approval anymore. I had chosen myself, and that choice radiated through the small routines of my day. The sun was gentle, filtering through the thin clouds, casting long shadows over the backyard. I felt grounded, free, and for the first time in decades, entirely responsible for my own joy. Emily arrived later that afternoon. We spent hours together, talking, planning, laughing. She brought stories of her life, her work, friends, small triumphs. I shared tales of Robert, the early days of our marriage, and the quiet victories of raising a family on modest means. Our conversations weren't just exchanges of words, they were bridges connecting lives that had almost drifted apart. One evening, Emily asked quietly, "Have you thought more about what you'll do with the house?" I looked at her, really looked at the young woman who had chosen to see me, week after week. Without expectation, I think it should go to someone who understands the meaning of family, who values connection over convenience, I said. Her eyes widened, emotion spilling over. "Aunt Dot," she whispered. Tears gathered in both of our eyes. We didn't need words to fill the space. We began planning together Sunday dinners, small gatherings of people who mattered. Emily suggested inviting friends who had been overlooked or forgotten, people who, like us, understood the quiet power of being noticed. Each gathering was a celebration, not of wealth, not of obligation, but of recognition, care, and the simple joy of presence. In the evenings, I sometimes thought of Jessica. She hadn't called in months. Part of me wondered if she ever would. Part of me didn't care. I was learning that not every absence needed closure. Not every relationship required permission to exist on my terms. Some people remain in your life out of choice, others fade. I had decided who I wanted close. The lessons of that summer, Patty's fragile strength, Emily's unwavering attention, the quiet power of choosing yourself, settled deep within me. I was no longer a passenger in my own life. I had claimed my seat at the table, and it was mine to keep, with or without the others. Weeks passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. My small house in Phoenix became a place of quiet warmth, filled with the soft echoes of laughter, conversations, and shared meals. Emily arrived every Tuesday without fail, sometimes with friends who needed a friendly face, sometimes alone. We cooked together, experimented with new recipes, and told stories until the sun dipped behind the mountains. The house, once silent and predictable, felt alive again. I walked through my garden every morning, letting the fragrance of blossoms and the gentle brush of desert wind remind me that life continued, even after disappointment and hurt. The Palo Verde tree, stubbornly beautiful, dropped its yellow flowers in a steady rain, petals carpeting the stones below. I thought of Patty, of Emily, of the choices that had brought me here, choices rooted in self respect, in valuing those who truly saw me. Emily and I began planning a small scholarship fund in memory of my high school friend, Patty. The Dorothy and Patricia Fund, we decided, would support students who felt invisible, who longed for acknowledgement. It became our shared project, a tangible reminder of the power of recognition and care. Each application we received told a story of struggle, resilience, and hope. Helping shape that hope gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Occasionally, I received letters from Jessica. Carefully folded, written in her familiar handwriting, each one attempted to justify or apologize. I read them once, sometimes twice, then placed them in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I had learned that some bridges, once burned, need not be rebuilt. Some doors remain closed, and the life you reclaim behind them is rich enough to flourish on its own. My 71st birthday approached. This year, I didn't wait for anyone's invitation. I invited Emily, a few close friends, and neighbors I had known for years. We laughed over lasagna and homemade bread, the clinking of glasses punctuating our stories. The night was soft and ordinary in the best way, a celebration without pretense, where everyone present mattered because they had chosen to be there. One afternoon, as Emily and I sat on the back patio drinking iced tea, she reached for my hand. "Aunt Dot, I'm grateful for everything, for letting me in, for trusting me." I squeezed her hand back. "No, Emily, thank you. You showed me what family really is. You reminded me that presence, care, and choice matter more than obligation." I looked at the garden, at the yellow petals scattered like confetti on the stones, and felt a sense of completion. The past, the misunderstandings, the disappointments, the long years of being unseen, had shaped me, but it did not define me. I had claimed my seat, chosen my companions, and set boundaries that honored my worth. Driving through the streets of Phoenix, I sometimes passed families laughing together, couples holding hands, children chasing each other across sidewalks. For a moment, the old ache of longing flared, but it was brief. I realized that my life, my joy, and my recognition no longer depended on those who failed to show up. I had discovered that my own presence, fully embraced, was enough. I thought of the airports, the missed flights, the shattered expectations, and I understood finally hope is not fragile. Hope survives baggage handling. Hope survives even the hardest betrayals. It thrives in the quiet moments of self respect, in the people who choose you, in the life you build for yourself. On a Sunday evening, Emily left after our weekly dinner. I sat on the patio, tea in hand, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. My house was quiet but not lonely. The walls held laughter and warmth. The garden smelled of blooms and possibility. I breathed in the cool desert air and felt fully alive, fully seen, fully myself. That night, I wrote a note to myself: your seat at the table is yours. No one can take it unless you allow them. Choose wisely. Walk away when necessary. Celebrate yourself every day. And I smiled because I finally understood. I didn't need permission to value my life. I didn't need an invitation to celebrate my own existence. I had claimed it. And for the first time in decades, the world felt wide and welcoming, a place where I belonged. The table was mine, always mine. And there was room enough for those who chose to join, but never a need to wait for those who did not.